that why, wow, that why comes from inside of you. Nobody can give you your why. Isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting?
You say that, and it reminds me of something I was thinking about. I was trying to think about. I was just segueing, into
Mm-hmm.
things, and I was thinking about the minute, like the moment that I knew that I wanted to study history. So I graduated high school in 2004. I mean, my entire high school career, I had my history teachers were great, but
Mm-hmm.
everything was colored context of in the context of 9/11. I mean, it was so
Mm-hmm.
recent,
Oh, yes, of course.
and so it was like that was the everybody was obsessed with this. I didn't get a whole lot um in the way of um like high school level, Western history. Really, I mean,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was all very centric, and it was hard not to be. I don't blame anybody for that. But I remember sitting in the second part. Of course, when we were on the quarter system at OU, you had a survey class of 3 parts. The history courses did, and it was part B. It was the first one I took of Western Civ. It was and it was talking about Bob Leith was talking about basically the rise of Spain as the world's first intercontinental call them superpower, but power
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the 1500s.
You're reminding me of my Western history now. I mean, Western
Right.
civilization. I'm going
Yeah,
back
and
to
I
that.
want
Yeah.
Bob was I want to say
Yeah. 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 That's
um,
right.
but I mean, about halfway through that course, and I'm learning about the unification of the Iberian Peninsula under Ferdinand and Isabella, and the rise of France as an exploratory power, and the rise of Britain as this colonial power. And I just two things hit me at one time, and I could take you to the room, and I could take you to the seat that I was sitting in, over there at OU, and when I just realized how is it that nobody ever had ever told me anything about this. I mean, when you're 18 or 19, the responsibility for your learning is the way you kind of default to it is that somebody else is supposed to tell me what I'm supposed to know.
Yeah.
So in retrospect, I mean, but at that moment I thought, how is it that I've never heard of any of this? This is all seems, because I could see where it was going. I could see what it was setting up and where it was leading to, and how it was directly connected to me sitting in that seat that day. And so I had that thought, and then the revelation was, I don't want to just know a little bit about this stuff. Like I feel like I need to know everything I can about this. I need a formal education in history, and I need to do everything I can to pass that along. And up to that point, I mean, it had just been, well, what are you going to do? Well, my dad was a lawyer, so maybe I'll be a lawyer.
There it is. Yeah.
I mean, and I thought about journalism. I thought about different things. Once I realized that I couldn't, do it the way Hunter Thompson did it, I decided against journalism. But I mean, but still, that was the moment, and I mean, it struck me, like Jefferson said, like a fire bell in the nights. I mean, it was
like a what?
Like a fire bell, Jefferson's fire bell.
Oh,
Yeah.
explain that. What is that fire bell? You mean like a fire, like something's on fire? The fire bell?
Yeah, the fire bell. Yeah, it's a letter that he writes to a guy named John Holmes. He's talking about the Missouri Compromise of 1820, where Maine was allowed admission into the United States as a free state, with Missouri coming in as a slave state, drawing the 3630 line of parallel. Slavery is legal down here, not up here, sort of thing. And basically, Jefferson talks about slavery. He talks about it in that letter as the issue that would almost certainly be the undoing of the United States. And he says that we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor let him go. And
That's amazing. Those are amazing lines, aren't they? Because it it gutted well, I'll go ahead and speak for Jefferson on this. It showed the most inordinate hypocrisy that you would give to one group freedom that you've so fought for, but deny the other group that same general freedom. Because when he says we hold these truths, those are general, overriding, overarching universal truths. Those aren't just particular truths for one thing. And so if you think about it, it shows, your hypocrisy shows like the noonday sun, I've always said, because you're thinking, this is only for you, but you're writing it as if it's here. So which is it? Is it just for that, or is it for everyone? And so we've struggled long about that. But it is, again, it goes down to that beautiful why that we have within our heartbeat as what we were trying to form and what we have going on. It's almost like if we follow our why, and I don't want to make this out to sound like a 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got it, here's your why. Because the why is very strong. It's a very, it will take over your life. And that sense of the why that you felt literally changed your way of thinking about the world and changed your vocation, changed your direction. And you've become this fantastic history teacher because of the why. See, it awakened you and you've got it now. So now you can just talk about how we're going to do this, how I'm going to teach, what I'm going to teach. You can just talk all day about the hows and the whats all, but you keep the why. You keep the why. And maybe there are other things that govern that you might not have discovered. Like, I mean, when I first started out, it had touched me, like in what I was studying in philosophy and theology, and I wanted to change the world with that, and still do. So I've always cherished the why. The calling is a why. I mean, I've been thinking long about the calling, a vocation, and I wonder if we're doing ourselves a great disfavor by not trying to explore that within us and not trying to give that away to people that we love or to the society, to help young people, to help anyone, young and younger, how to discover the why. I mean, you're never too old to discover your why. I mean, let's put it this way, you're never too young. You're never, I don't like to use the word old, Joe. So I'm just talking about the idea of, being youthful, because it keeps you youthful. It transforms you. It just, you keep seeing this newness, this freshness, this growth, because you're feasting your mind and your heart over the why and from the why. And so then turns, if you think about it, that they went away from there, perhaps thinking from the battle that you were talking about, that maybe he gave them much more than just a victory. He gave them a sense of vision about what they were trying to do. And then it locked them in. It brought them in, that's their why too. Someone so eloquently said, I think it might have been Cynic again, it sounds like I'm turning the broadcast over to him, but he said something that was really remarkable. And I'll just offer the line that when people show up for something like a rally or like something that is a part of a movement, and you're showing up, you're not showing up to see that individual in action. You're not showing up to watch that person speak or listen to them teach or whatever they're doing. He said, you're not even showing up for them at all. You're showing up for yourself. Isn't that beautiful? Because if you think of any great moment, like I I know that we've talked about faith, but if you just take away all of the religious trappings and you look at somebody like the Sermon on the Mount, you're thinking that they're there, historically speaking. The group gathers, and you've got this person of history who's in the middle of the Roman Empire in Judea doing the speaking. But when they heard the Sermon on the Mount, they didn't go to watch Jesus talk. They didn't go for him. They went for themselves, because they knew those are words that I can hinge and will give me a why that can help me to beat the awful arm of the Roman Empire that has now come into our lands and now rules everything. But it starts that heart. Man, that is so good. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I mean, this is not only Jesus, it's Socrates, it's Martin Luther King Jr., it's Daniel Morgan, right?
Yeah.
It's George Washington. It's the why. It's that constancy of the why. I love that, how you pointed that out, how you pointed out the inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what strikes me the most about it is that, and it could just be the way that we interact with history, but, these are not casual observers of their world that we're learning about. They're not just lazy critics. You mentioned that before. I mean, it's not sitting around, criticizing over there or over there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't succumb. Like, none of these people, Daniel Morgan didn't succumb to cynicism. If he had succumbed to cynicism, he would have said, these guys are worthless. I can't win with these guys. We'll just pack it up and move on down to the next stop and see if, maybe I can get some more Army regulars or something.
And if I can't, maybe I could join the British. Maybe, yeah. Maybe this is over,
right.
But there's no, yeah, go on, please.
So, they had this, and I think it's something that, like, when you talk about the why, I mean, I think that a lot of times maybe what we fail to do that, and I just feel like was done more in the past, what we seem to fail to do a lot now in focusing on that why is, well, it's not that we fail to do this, it's that we overestimate what we already understand to be true. We don't think enough about, what it is we're after. And it's very like Aristotelian in a way. Like you have to decide what is important, what is for the public interest, what is for the private interest, what, there are things, and we almost, it's like we skip that. And I think it's easy to do in modern society because it's all commentary. Everything's commentary. So it's very easy to skip over, the idea of, well, wait, hold on a second. We need to decide, what it is that we're trying to accomplish here together. And then we can kind of maybe debate about the other things later, but, let's really spend some time thinking about these big ideas. And I think that people really, I mean, I've noticed that when you start to talk about those bigger questions, those bigger why questions, that people really have to kind of step back away from their preconceived notions about other people. And they have to really think about that answer. Okay, well, why is it that, why do we do anything as a country? Why do we do anything as a community? What's the point? And what are we getting at? What are we fostering? What are we passing on to future generations? Why is that important? I mean, even thinking along those lines, I think can, I've noticed that it can really break down a lot of barriers. It can break down a lot of the fluff, a lot of, quite frankly, the BS that people get bogged down in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
mm-hmm.
just constantly small rhetorical victories, that mean nothing 5 minutes after they've been realized. I mean,
yeah. It's I got thinking, not to interrupt you on that point, but when you were talking about, when we were back to the gold, and you remove everything, you remove every hindrance that's going to encumber the greatness that you seek. And if you take the idea of the why will never the why will never be second best. It will never be. Let's see, how could I say that? And I'm going to go out on a limb on this and say it this way. The why is singular. The why, you don't say, well, my first why is this, but my second why, in case my first why doesn't work out, is this, right? It's like, it's all or nothing. It's all in. Back to your story, either we win or we lose. If we win, we move on and we have freedom, and we have what is essentially the right to govern our own lives. If we lose, we're back and we don't have anything else. We're done. So in a sense, that's such a beautiful disencumbering. The idea that when you can achieve your why, that you remove everything from that and accomplish that which is great, because there's not a secondary thing that you can fall back on. Because that goes into that question that I was asked, we had talked about before we started recording. At what time or at what point does the second thing or the secondary become like that crutch or become that option? Or is it, as you said, you've got to lay it all on the line and everything else is off the table? You've got to do it. You're either on or off.
I would say there are lots of complicating factors. I mean, life is life. I think when you become responsible for the life of someone else,
sure,
that certainly can.
And that's a great why.
Yeah, exactly. That becomes your new why almost automatically, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's you don't, that's the ultimate responsibility. And
that's interesting.
It's an ultimate responsibility. It's
that if you think about it, that why, you will find a way to bring in the whys, that they will cohese. They will come in. They will come into that one. They're yours. They're your whys. So that's interesting. That's interesting.
And do we have too many fallback? I mean, you'd prompted me with this a little bit, just very briefly about, I mean, do we have too many fallbacks? I mean, is it actually good for us? I almost interpret it as, can you ever actually get to a why if you have, okay, well, I've got,
there it is,
options A, B, C, D, E. I've got so many.
That's interesting thought. So repeat that question. Can you ever get to a why if you have all the options?
Yeah, if you have a bunch of options, right? If you have all kinds of options, can you ever actually get to a why? I think you can. I mean, I would have, but I just think it's probably a lot harder. I mean, what is it? Bob Dylan said, "When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose." So,
like a Rolling Stone, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
No, I might be wrong on the song, but
that's it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's I think that that's, you know, the more your options grow, I mean, I think the easier it is to hedge, to settle, to say, well, just because this first thing didn't quite pan out the way I wanted it to, then I mean, I can just go on to option B. And listen, I'm not going to say that I haven't done that. I've absolutely done that.
Right.
I think though that where I got lucky was that I found my why. Like I had the options, but I found the why. And it's like, I find this is, we can't afford to not know about these things, for future generations to not know how we got here. We can't afford that. And I can't just leave that up to other people. I didn't, you know, if everybody like me who had that spark just left it up to everyone else to do that, then it would never happen. So, right. So yeah, it's really, it's interesting. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot here. I mean, and it's,
yeah, there is, isn't it? It's such a big, that's such a big subject. Go on. I interrupted you.
It reminds me, you know, it's July 5th. I mean, we are, you know, it's a pretty rich sort of a time frame we're dealing with here. You know, I mean, like 120 miles from Independence Hall, like 87 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the Battle of Gettysburg happened, you know, and 1,000 miles from there on the same day, the Battle of Vicksburg ended. I mean, and I think about those things, and, you know, so many of the questions that we are not asking now, I mean, you could answer them. I mean, why did those guys charge across that field at Pickett's Charge? Why did those guys do that? Right? I mean, you answer that question and you answer it historically, there is not a single person who could find an honest answer to that question. And I'm talking tracking it back to the very origin of why they were there in the first place, and, you know, why they signed up, why they supported the side that they supported. Not only you find a single person that would find an honest reading of the answer to that question that couldn't answer many, many other questions about where we are even today. I think it would help them and make them understand a little bit about the complexity of this history that we're dealing with. You know, we're on this, you know, we're only been around for a couple of 100 years here. Just now starting, you know, I mean, we are really reaping what we've sown in a lot of ways. And if we just asked larger questions across the board and sought real answers, I mean, just truth, right? Just the truth, nothing more, nothing less, just the truth. I think that we would all, I think that we would be in a much better, place. I mean, in all of this, I feel the weight of, you know, talking, I just can't help it. I get drawn to, you know, questions of community and questions of society and culture and civilization and political environment. I can't help it. It's in my nature. When we talk about things like the why, there's that personal, of course, it's a very personal thing, but it's also, I mean, let's face it, it's also incredibly political. It's also incredibly, culturally relevant. I mean, and that, no matter where you are, you could in the United States or, you know, or Germany, it doesn't matter. I mean, you know, you or Australia, you know, these are both personal and broadly political things that we ask. They can be scaled. They are questions that can be scaled.
So you can take them individually or take them as societally or as a group or whatever. It's really interesting, isn't it? That power, that motivation, that that purpose, the idea of that, the something of the heart, the inspiration. You know, when I made up the wonder, the wisdom, and the wild, and I thought long, you know, about these points of my compass, I call them, that's what I, you know, that's how I guide the the whole thing, even the whole, you know, call it ministry, call it teaching, call it what you will, you know, this application of these ideas. But wonder is the closest thing to that, almost that why. It's that impulse. Well, Socrates, of course, says that wonder is the beginning of philosophy. It's the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of everything. It's like the beginning of the quest, that wonder, that sense of inspiration. Now, of course, that's in education, and in philosophy. You could say in other, you know, places, it might be freedom, it might be love, it might be to make sure my children are safe, and all of those. But if you just think about that, the wonderful word of wonder, of, and kind of link it in poetically, philosophically, even historically, with that idea of the why. It's like Einstein says in this one place, and I only know it from a textbook that I used to use in the philosophy of science. And he said, he to whom the emotion of wonder, or the passion of wonder, is gone, who does not stand, and I'll try to put this more succinctly to what he does say. He mentions the word wonder, but he begins with this description of it, that stands wrapped in awe, RAPT, wrapped in awe of the great mystery. He to whom that emotion of the great mystery, of beholding that great mystery, he to whom that emotion is not there, is gone. In Einstein's words, he's as good as dead. You're as good as dead. You don't have any impulse. There's nothing. There's nothing driving you. So, in a sense, the wonder becomes the driving factor of it all. And that's the reason I begin with wonder. And then wisdom is when you gel it together. And maybe that is maybe that's how we do things, you know.
Well,
and then we come.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. I'm just
no, you're fine. And then you have the wild is the what or where we express that, and we see those two come in. Go on with your thought, because it's really it's a powerful idea.
So, I mean, you mentioned Einstein. You're talking about where this why and wonder and how it and how they interact. I think it was President Kennedy when he was talking about, the United States effort to get to space and land a man on the moon. He quoted this Irish writer, and he said, this nation has tossed its cap over the wall of space, and we have no choice but to follow it. And he's quoting this Irish writer, Frank O'Connor, and he was a contemporary. I mean, it was, I think that had been written at the same, like in the same year, actually, that Kennedy quoted it. This writer was talking about his boyhood, and then he and his friends would be out exploring, and they would come to in Ireland, and they would come to an orchard wall that was maybe just a little higher than they thought they could climb. And one of them would take off their caps and toss it over, because once you do that, you have to follow. You've got to get your cap.
Oh, that's so good.
And
it's such an analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and so he says this, and it's like, and I cannot for the life of me, and maybe you will recall, but I tied it into with your wonder thing, with the why and the what. So the why is there. It's like the why is not yet explained, but Kennedy leaves it understood. I mean, he does a great job of explaining it. It's obvious to so many people in the time that it was the Cold War and whatever. But I heard somebody else, and like I said, I cannot think for the life of me for this, but because we came, the why for that, why go to space, why go to the moon? Because we came down from the trees and we came out of the cave. I mean, that's why.
It's just like, yeah.
And it gets me every time. And I cannot for the life of me remember who it was that said that last bit, because we came down from the trees and we stepped out of the cave. That's why.
See, that's just rocking my world, because I mean, that coming down from the trees, because we're human, because we're, as has been so eloquently put by a modern writer, like you were mentioning, modern writers back then. A modern writer, she writes, and I can't give the actual quote. Her name is Maria Popova, and I hope I say her name correctly. She has a wonderful blog that she puts out, and she said, "We are the animals that look to the stars and wonder." Right? It's that's us. Yeah. That's our contribution. It puts me into just these great smiles. It's like,
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just hear this beautiful sense of, it's almost the sense of why. It's the wonder. Well, I was telling somebody, and I don't know whether I've ever shared it with a lot of people or not, but you were talking about stepping into that classroom and doing history. I had this inkling when I graduated from seminary, and I was put within the appointment system of the United Methodist Church. I was in the church, and I was, I had everything set up, so to speak. What you do is you get into the church and you keep going on, and you get larger churches and you get paid more and more, salary, and it's a good gig. You just hold on to that. But I picked up I'd wanted to study philosophy because this guy had said, who was a minister, he kind of indicated tackle these great thinkers in your life. He was a minister, and I was just listening to him on the radio one day, and I thought, well, I've always wanted to study philosophy, and I'm thinking, I had been reading this one book that had really made a difference in my life, and I was thinking, I need to do this. I need to just simply do it, study it, get you a book, go at it. You can read, let's go. So I picked up this small copy, this handheld copy, not to say that you can't hold Plato's dialogues in their entirety. But it's a huge volume. But it was almost like a small paperback copy. It's like no larger than just like this simple little novel that you would buy at some store. And it was the dialogues of Plato. I bought it at Ohio University in Athens. I bought it in a little corner bookstore. I've asked students if the bookstore's still there, and it is. But it's this little copy of Plato, right? So in it is the full apology, which is Socrates on trial. I think it has the credo, which that's during he's dealing with the question, should he go or stay? Should he run? Credo is trying to tell him, you should run, because he was sentenced to death, right? So that idea, which was dispelled, but then it had the Phaedo, and then it had parts of the Laws and parts of the Republic, I think. Well, my story is that one day I was in the parsonage, I was in, the church, I was, whatever. And I was reading the Apology by Plato about Socrates, his teacher, on trial for his life, historical happening, 399 or 400 BCE, right? Athens, Greece. He's facing 501 jurors. They had a war with Sparta. It's all history. These things weren't done in a corner. He's there. This is a real person. Plato's a real person. Everybody's real. Athens is real. This trial is real. Everything. And Plato is writing about the trial, what he said, what Socrates, his master, his teacher, said. And it comes to this one point, and if you look at it, it's 29D through 30C. That's the way they have it delineated in the text. And he begins with the words, "Men of Athens, I love you." But, contrast, I will never stop practicing philosophy. And I will do it as long as I live. And there is no other blessing that has ever come any greater than what I'm giving you. For you go about, and I'm paraphrasing this, he said, you go about loving your wealth, your power, your influence, and you give no thought, again, a contrast, you give no thought to truth, understanding, and the perfection of your soul. None whatsoever. And then he goes on and he says, so if you would acquit me, if you would say to me, this is all over, you're done, you're free, I will never stop. I will always be imploring you about the message that I have heard from the God. He calls it from God. And I'm giving that to you. I will never stop. And then the crucial line, not even if I have to die 100 times. He's got him. He's got his why. See it? But it's to the historical context that he knew when he said that, he threw his cap over the wall.
Yeah.
See it? He knew he was in. He knew. I think he knew he was going to die right at that point. He knew he had laid it all out. He's going to die for this now. And he's just saying, I'll do it 100 times over. Doesn't matter. When I read that, what went through my mind is I had just spoken of sort of this thing, I don't know, a couple weeks before that, whatever. I could take this, what I knew is I could take this and put it into a pulpit and I would get several amens and they would think it came straight out of just any person of faith doing any sort of speaking. But here was a man, his name was Socrates, he was a philosopher, and the year was 400 BC or 399 BCE. And Christianity is yet to come along. And I thought, what is going on? And then that gave me the bright idea that I had discovered something that nobody ever knew about. And I thought, I ran out of that. Well, I ran with that and I thought, I have discovered something. I don't know why that people don't understand this. I don't understand why we've been put in the dark so long, but I have uncovered. It's like uncovering the Holy Grail. It's like I have discovered something, and it's like discovering a whole new constellation, or discovering gravity, or discovering something. It's just like, wow. And only to find out that we've been talking about this ever since Jesus lived and died. We've been thinking this sounds an awful lot like Socrates. And then it links up with every great religious teacher, and then my mind was just filled with it. And do you know, that was at that point I knew my why. I knew I was to give this to the world. I was to study this, and this would take me. And it eventually took me all the way to my PhD, which is entitled Philosophy as a Religious Experience in Plato. All for one passage. Wow. Totally wiped me out. I still think about that today. So
it's like your Madeleine's.
I'm sorry.
It's like your Madeleine's, like Marcel Proust.
Yeah. It's the one, just like you sat in that seat, right?
Yeah.
When you sat in that seat, I read that passage. I knew where I am. I knew where I was. I still do. I know the bookstore that I bought the copy of it. I know where it is. Yeah. You know where that is. That you had such a point and such a point in your life. And I want to give that to everybody. Everybody needs to discover that for their lives. I hope that they can. I hope that they will. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of courage sometimes to follow that out. You know, when you're stopping to think about it, because this is going to this will know no other master. You're rewriting your life now. This is it. This is you. This is your why. This is your moment. Think about that. I mean, it's just like boom, there it is.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and you gotta, I mean, and it's funny because I look back and I could, you know, I took every history course that they offered at Ohio University Southern in the years that I was there. I'm pretty sure I took every single one of them. I didn't have to do that. and I look at the balance.
But you did.
But I did, because I mean, when I look, the only reason that I took anything other than history, political science, philosophy was because my advisors told me I had to. I mean, you know, like you know, that DARS report isn't going to get any closer.
Yeah, that's right.
Done
that's
if
right.
you don't get that thing, you know, that biology class finished up there. Palmer. So, but you know, I think I took every one of them, you know, and I look at it now. I'm sure my wife maybe wishes that I would have just left out a few. Maybe the balance of the student loans wouldn't be as high as it is if I hadn't taken so many. But I don't regret a single second of it. I mean, I'll be paying on it for a long time, but that's not, I don't even ever think about that. It's not even, right. I mean, I'm only bringing it up now to point out how little that matters. It doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter at all because it's priceless. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely priceless. And you know, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder how much progress I'm making in you know, helping people get to their why. But I know that I know that if I'm exercising them and their minds the way that I'm confident that I am, it's going to help them get there. I was thinking of something earlier when you were talking about just it's almost like the process, going through that process. You get the stuff that you need. I mean, you may not, I mean, through education, I mean, you may not be, somebody said once, it may not be what you want, but it'll be all you want. So, you know, through education, you don't always necessarily get exactly what you are hoping to, but you always get some stuff. Like you get the stuff that is necessary to extract from life what you want. And, you know, when you get to that why, I mean, you will be able to get at it. You have to be able to get at it. You can, I mean, it can be in here, but if you can't get at it, again, I mean, it's Just so, and I know this seems a little bit rambly, but the idea is that, I mean, and I got lucky. I had a lineup of great professors and, and great teachers
Sure.
that always fostered that, you included for sure. And,
I appreciate that.
But I don't know. I wonder sometimes what is our delivery method for the stuff of why? How are we delivering it to kids? Like how are we delivering that to young people? And it's like, is it just, I mean, are we just kind of like hoping that they figure it out? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't.
Well, I was going to encourage you on that for a second, because and it's not to let us off the hook, but I think by living out an example of a person that burns with a passion and a purpose, that you are that example of an individual who has not only a job, but you have a calling, you have a vocation, and they see that. And I'm wondering if, like Benjamin Franklin going to see George Whitefield preach, and he says, said, why do you go out there, Mr. Franklin? Of course, George Whitefield was a evangelical preacher of the Second Great Awakening. He's one that gave John Wesley his inspiration to preach outside. And and so Franklin would go and watch him preach. This is the story I heard. And they asked him one time, Benjamin Franklin, not being, your local Sunday school teacher, said, why do you go to see Whitefield? And he said, because I love to go and watch a man burn. Right? I love to go watch a man burn.
Yeah.
So as I had someone on the podcast just recently say, you can take anything, and if you add a person that is fully, like, that will fill that with wonder, and that they have a vocation. They didn't say about the vocation and the why about that, but if that is their driving purpose, and they can make, he said, you can take any subject and make it like passionate. You can convince people that this is great. I mean, this is super. I didn't know that, I didn't know that I don't know, a stalactite and a stalagmite could be so interesting. I'm just using a banal example in a cave. I didn't know that a cave could be that interesting, anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know that a cloud could be that interesting. I didn't know that this, like, for example, I'll use yours. I didn't know that one person fighting in the American Revolution could give me such a lesson of life. One battle, one person. I didn't know that, but yet hearing that, and I wonder if what we find, and again, it's speculation, but when people look on us, especially young people, people that we're wanting to influence, people that we're wanting to encourage or fill with wonder, if they see our passion, they may not follow in that same viewpoint that we have, our same why. They can't, because it's our why. And they have to have their own why. They have to, because it's them, it's their purpose, not our purpose instilled within them. It's that they achieve their own purpose through us. And so it's, interestingly enough, I'm not sure. I mean, nobody showed me how to do what I do, because when I started out doing this, I saw some people in action, and I've taken some lessons in the way they teach, maybe their techniques, maybe their watts, maybe their house specifically, how they come across or what they do at the beginning of a course or something like that. But when I could see them and I could remember back to their teaching, I knew they were passionate too. But that was given to me just by my own experience. I discovered that by taking that, as you were saying, all away. And then that's the best I can give. That's the best I can do. I can give you an example. And you will find your own fire. You will find your own why. You will find your own purpose. You will find your own vocation. It might be like mine. It might be doing the same thing. It might be a professor. It might be a teacher of history. It might be a philosophical theologian. It might be a minister. It might be this or a combination thereof, whatever. But you will find that because that's your passion. But you will always remember us. We were on fire. And I love that, I mean, we took it all away. We had a calling. We removed everything so that we could accomplish great things. We were here, right? We were here. And so too, we remember back. I mean, we've never met these people, but yet we knew, see it, they had it. There was a why there. That's interesting. And I hope that everybody discovers that. I've wondered often, someone said to me one time, he said, I've never had a calling. I never had a calling. And I wondered about that. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know whether to say, yes, you have. It's just that you didn't do the hard work. Or what do you say? And I felt myself just muted on that one point. I don't know that experience. Like you said, I was, we're one of the blessed ones, one of the lucky ones. We've discovered that. And I wish that for everybody. And how we do it, maybe how we got along with that. I think your point about removing everything is golden. I think that's a beautiful, wrestle with it. Get down on that, discover it. I can't tell you what it is, but it's in you and you will discover that will be revealed to you. So interesting. He just inspired like the battle leader, Daniel Morgan, in some sense. It's to the breach speech, like Henry V, isn't it?
St. Crispin's Day.
Yeah, St. Crispin's Day. It's their St. Crispin's Day. They will remember. They will remember us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They will bid themselves cheap that they were not here.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to tell you, my friend, you've given me so much to think about. And you've given, I know, our listeners so much to think about just by your words, your stories, your points. That's so good.
Well, I got to say, listen, I wouldn't be, and it's very true, Dr. Newman. I want everybody to know, I owe a lot to sitting in your philosophy classes. It helped me really deepen. And,
I appreciate that, man. I do.
What I was trying to do,
that touches my heart, because when you're used in that way, that you can make a difference, and that touches me, and I sincerely appreciate that. So let me ask you one more question, and if you could close on one thought, if you could give somebody one thing to think about, that would be really like one question to ask themselves, or one point to remind themselves that they could go on and think about that. Do you have something that you would ask of them to ask of themselves?
Whatever your principles or beliefs, whatever your vision, know them well. And marry your heart
Mm.
and your mind to the search for truth.
Wow.
And you'll never be far from the legacy of any great people or great effort that came before you.
That's remarkable.
That may be.
That's remarkable.